Hello there, my friends. It's good to be with you. Salamun alaikum. I want to answer the question, what is a good Muslim? Because I think this is a question that every born Muslim, but also anyone that embraces the Qur'an, embraces the deen of Islam, asks him or herself, what do I do to be a good person, to be accepted, to be a person of merit, of righteousness, of virtue? Because the Qur'an does use these words, the Qur'an uses various words. It uses the word Hasan for good behavior. It uses the word Salih for righteous behavior. It uses the word Muttaqin for people who are conscientious. It uses the word, so those are some of the words, right? So the question is, if we are to be muhsinin, which comes from the word Hasan, or doers of good, if we are to be muttaqin, people of conscience, if we are to be, what is the other word, just salihin, people who are just wholesome, righteous, and decent. What are the attributes that we need to display, or that we need to adopt to satisfy those qualities, or to give expression to those qualities? Now, my thesis on this channel is that very idea is a contested ground. That very idea of what is a salih person, what is a muhsin, what is a person that is righteous, a muttaqin, all these positive traits, I believe, and I advance the thesis that is in fact something that is under contestation, that has been challenged, that has been misrepresented for us. Now, there are two views, right? The one view is that for us to give expression to these ideas of muhsin, salih, muttaqin, for us to give expression to these beautiful traits, we need to acquire knowledge, and that knowledge is vested within the holy text of the Qur'an, but also that knowledge is to be found within the texts of the ahadith, of what is being narrated from the life of the Prophet. So those are the two sources of knowledge. That's the one view. That view is contested by the alternative view that says that the Qur'an and what is rationally deducible, or to be deduced from the Qur'an, and what is in the best interest of society, there's a word for that, the ma'ruf, or the maslaha, or the generality, maslahatul am. There are fiqh wording for that. Those not having any basis in hadith would be an alternative source of what is good, what is righteous, what is wholesome. Because the Qur'an does in fact make the call that we should act in terms of what is ma'ruf. What is ma'ruf? Now, what is ma'ruf? Because when we draw up our wasiyah, the testament, our will and testament, according to Surah, I think, Baqarah, it tells us that we should do so in accordance with what is ma'ruf, what is commonly decent, accepted behavior within your society. The word ma'ruf also comes often in other places. For example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs, enjoin with what is right, and for what is ma'ruf, amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. So this concept of ma'ruf is also very commonly in the Qur'an where we are instructed to act in terms of what is ma'ruf, what is commonly accepted and what is decent in terms of society in which you find yourself in. So those are the two views, right? The one is the hadith and the Qur'an are the determinants of what is righteousness, what is good behavior, the knowledge of what is good behavior. And the alternative is the Qur'an and what is ma'ruf, what is commonly decent within your society. And that is directly based on the word ma'ruf. Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. So the question is, there's a contestation. On the one hand, you have the hadith, let's say 150,000 hadiths. On the other hand, you have the Qur'an and what is ma'ruf. Now, yes, when we go technically into the fiqh of, the traditional fiqh or the jurisprudence as developed by the doctors of law, then they have formulated almost like a complete code, the canon. They have developed a full canon of Islamic law, and that canon of Islamic law contains the various categories of halal, haram, makruh, mubah, and so it is between halal, haram. For the Hanafi, there is also a category called wajib, or I think that is for the Shafi'i. So there is farud, there is mustahab, there is makruh, and there is mubah. So in terms of the doctors of law, they have codified, they have hard-coded the canon. They have, in fact, what we deal with today is a frozen canon of Islamic law. It is law that has been developed 1,200 years ago, 1,300 years ago by the great jurisprudent scholars like Idris Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, and Ahmad Hanbal, Malik bin Anas. And these doctors of law, these great religious doctors of law, there were others also like Sheikh Ozai, who is now, and then there are additional ones like you have the Ja'fari and you have the Zaidi, and there are some various others also that are sort of generally acceptable. So they have, when we just look at the Sunni tradition, then they have pretty much codified the canon of law, and that canon is what determines what is righteous behavior. So we are required, on the one hand, to subscribe to a hard-coded notion of what good behavior constitutes, what righteousness constitutes, what muhsin, ihsan constitutes, doing good, what what it means to be salih, what it means to be a muttaqin. So all these terms that we find in the Qur'an that are required in terms of us as traits, the logic is that if you only conform to the law, to the complete and codified law, then you would have given expression to all those positive traits. And that is the traditional vision of Islam. Here's a body of codified law. The doctors of law have developed it. They've frozen it in time back in the year, 1200 or 800 Common Era. They've codified it, and over time, all that is required is for new generations of doctors of law to go and just sort of tweak it, reinterpret it, and make it fit so that you have access to the perfect way of giving expression to being a decent, positive, human being. That is the traditional view. Now, why am I critical about that traditional view? And why do I say that we cannot, there is no justification, there is no rational logic behind saving that view or clinging to that view. And the one problem is that the world is a diverse and, mind-boggling place. If you look at the difference in cultures, if you go to the Far East and to the Far West. And then we have also a great variance or difference in time. So geographically, spatially, as well as in terms of time, we have vast differences between where we are and where the original coders or jurisprudence or formulators of that law lived. You go to a person in America in the year let's use our date, 2024, and you are trying to impose a code that was developed back in the year 800 Common Era. How on earth are you able to impose something that was developed there into the year 2024? And I'll give you an example. For example, last year or 2-3 years ago, we had we had something that was referred to as a global epidemic or a pandemic. And that brought up huge challenges to the entire Muslim world. At that point in time, the Muslims, and I'm in a society where I saw the fumbling about of the religious scholars. The religious scholars initially came up with fatwas, and they based these fatwas on hadiths that they could track down back from 1,000 years ago. And they looked at the words of famous historical scholars, ancient scholars that are dead for 1,000 years already. They looked at, the views of the Shafi'i and the views of the Hanafi scholars, and they adumbrated, they cobbled together fatwas that were meant to offer the Muslims an answer or direction in the middle of that COVID problem. That COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, what was called a pandemic or a global epidemic. And they came up with, now there was the position of the formal established states, the South African government, the US government, Australia, whatever, UK, which were calling on a complete shutdown of all places of worship. Now they had to deal with that now, right? The places of worship are being shut down, and they just initially couldn't get themselves to take that position. And so they took the position that, we should allow X number of people. So out of a mosque with 1,000 people, let's allow 100 people in the mosque. And they fumbled about, and they came up with very, very awful and silly fatwas. I'm sorry to say, because they did it in all honesty, but the methodology of going back to ancient scholarship and ancient madhabs and ancient books could not answer the problem that they were faced with. In the end, they shut down the mosques. Some mosques went on, and they carried on against the wishes of the scholars. In the end, they cancelled the festivals, the Muslim festivals like Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha. They just cancelled the festivals. They, cancelled communal salah. So salah in community at the central venue, they just cancelled that also. And all I can say is that it gave rise to a massive amount of division and dispute, because there were obviously some of them that felt that they have no right to cancel Jumu'ah. Jumu'ah is something that is accepted amongst the Muslims. It is, it is an institution. It is a convention. And so that is the one of the serious where I could see that there was a complete breakdown of the system. There was a complete and utter breakdown of the system. The Muslim scholars, the religious leaders, were completely disempowered. They were exposed as being feckless or incompetent, unable to respond to the crisis, to the problems which ordinary Muslims faced. And my friends, nothing is more of an alert to you and me than reality. When we experience crises, when we experience pain, when we experience disease, when we experience a serious calamity, serious division, we must ask ourselves, where are we wrong in our behavior, in our analysis, and in our decisions that we have taken. And for me, that whole period of COVID speaks loudly about the incompetence, the inability, the lack of answers that the system that we've adopted, the system of going back to ancient scholars and their analysis and using that as the basis for determining what is right. Now, there are many other examples. For example, if you're living in a Muslim country, there are many Muslim traditional laws that are not found in the Qur'an. Let's say, for example, you see where I live, we in this country and South Africa, because we are we have such a godless government, and because our government is so colonized intellectually and culturally by the West. Yes, they did fight for Gaza, but unfortunately they are culturally colonized by Western ideas. And by Western ideas, I don't mean you, the kind people in the West. I mean satanic ideas. Ideas that are ripping families apart, that are ripping lives apart, that are damaging people in their lives, those ideas. And our government is a firm support of those ideas. You see, people who live under a state like this, or under a state like the UK, or a state like America, wherever, we have to devise a way in which our religious position, which we deem to be a position that is optimal to human functioning and optimal to human progress. Our religious position, the position of the Qur'an, the position of submission to the will of the Creator of the universe, is a position that is not just there for us to earn Jannat and to be lucky in this world and to get lots of rewards. But we actually, in fact, follow this way because it is the optimal way in which the human being can function. The human being functions optimally when he subscribes to the tenets that are taught in the Quran. For example, economically, we function optimally if we don't have killer interest wiping out people's wealth. In a perfect Muslim society, we function optimally if we don't have booze and drinking and gambling being commonly promoted and accepted. In an ideal Muslim society, we function optimally if we don't have casual and sort of immoral behavior, sexual behavior amongst the members of society. So we are not living in these societies as minorities that want to insulate and isolate ourselves from the rest. We are living in these societies that have succumbed to satanic beliefs and pressures as a vanguard, as a people who want to emancipate ourselves and emancipate our families and emancipate and safeguard all those around us and anyone who is interested in adopting the code and the message of the Quran. So here comes the point, and I think I will conclude here. The ideal society, as I postulate and argue on this channel, is a society where we have the Qur'an as a set of parameters. Now, that Qur'an offers a whole lot of general social sort of values that we can immediately adopt. For example, the Quran values a sense of generosity. It promotes that. A sense of charity. A sense of sharing and caring. It's very important. Although the Quran does state that do not wipe yourself out while caring for others. Preserve yourself. But whatever is beyond your needs should be invested in the well-being of those around you. And the Quran, in fact, isolates the widow, the orphan, the unprotected, the wayfarer, this person on the street, etc., the homeless, the captive, the addict, whatever. All those categories are listed very, very meticulously. So already for us to be a person, a salih person, a person of good behavior, a muttaqin, a muhsin, a doer of good, the Quran is already listing for us a whole range of specific practices. Like, for example, being conscious of Allah, always reflecting on God's presence and His power, always reflecting on the next person's need, reflecting on the oppressed, and finding a way in which we can make ourselves get to benefit those who are oppressed, those who have suffered misfortunes. So the Quran is already listing a range of practices that will make us qualify as being muhsinin, muttaqin, whatever. So what is this ma'roof thing? Ma'roof, for me, I understand ma'roof as in your society, within your context, whether you are in New York, whether you are in London, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Sydney, Johannesburg, Cape Town, wherever you are, India, wherever you are, Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, that you should, in your society, establish what is ma'roof. With your people, with your community, instead of being an isolated and insular group of Muslims holding on to this foolish notion of some sort of religious sect or religious denomination, we should be at the forefront of determining what is healthy, wholesome, and in the interest of our societies. We should be at the forefront of the research and of the lobbying and the advocacy of what is in the interest of our society. If we do not have the experts to research health issues, social issues, issues within governance, then we cannot function, you see. And that forces us. So knowledge for us, those who adhere to the idea of Qur'an and what is ma'roof, is not what is contained in 150,000 hadiths or in ancient texts and so on. Knowledge for us is the product of our research. When we research our society, we need to close up arguments against social promiscuity, social evils, the problems of casual sex. We need to be at the forefront of research on health issues. What is the cause of cancer? What is the cause of... Our doctors should not be serving the interests of the satanic forces. Our doctors should be serving the interests of the forces of righteousness, my friends. And to determine ma'roof, what is in the interest of our communities, is unique for every society. Just as the climate changes when you go from winter to summer, just as the rainfall, etc., all of these change as you go to the equator, so do we need to adapt and amend what is ma'roof, what is in our own local interests. So my friends, knowledge is in fact not what you find in archaic old books, but knowledge is the parameters you find in the Qur'an, and the detailed knowledge is what you find in terms of your research. So, as an example, when you look at hygiene, personal hygiene, the old system, the traditional way of Islam, argues that personal hygiene is what you read in the book of Imam Shafi under the Kitab al-Tahara. Personal hygiene is what you must memorize those things. What are the 7 types of clean water? It's well water, it's sea water, it's river water, blah, blah, blah. That, my friends, is what I'm arguing against. For us today, it's irrelevant to say that river water is clean, because our rivers are often more polluted than stagnant water. We have the phenomenon of polluted rivers. So rivers cannot automatically be regarded as a form of pure water. So in terms of personal hygiene, instead of going to books written 1,000 years ago, we need to develop best practice in terms of what is personal hygiene. And personal hygiene, we need to decide what is filth, what is contamination, what causes disease, what causes a damage to the health and so on. Then we must take personal hygiene to the level of social hygiene, my friends. Because in Muslim countries, they are obsessed with the 7 waters and with, the 15 places that you must wash in your face in. But Muslim countries are generally, and I'm not saying all of them, Iran definitely not, I've been there, but many of the other countries that I've been to, are basically overcome by filth. The streets are filthy, my friends. People spit. People commit acts that are completely revolting and unhygienic. The way they cook, even water supply is contaminated in many of those countries, and we are unable to drink the water that comes out of the taps. So when it comes to hygiene, at the personal level, at the social level, we need to have the best practice to develop new knowledge, new understanding of what constitutes optimal personal hygiene. The Qur'an says, Inna Allah yuhibbul mutatahhirin. Allah loves those who are hygienic. So now we need to comply with that verse and say, what does hygiene mean? What is not hygiene? What is hygiene? My friends, in summary, what I'm saying is that we need to move on from that antiquated, outdated idea of what Islam is, what goodness is, what kindness is, what decent behavior is, which is vested in a canon of archaic law, and we need to move to a time where we, depending on our own situation, which is unique for all different cultures and peoples, need to develop our own understanding, our own knowledge of what is best practice. That is the vision of the Qur'an, my friends. And that is why Allah uses the term ma'ruf. Those who command with what is best practice, amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. The word munkar doesn't mean evil. It means ignorance, unsubstantiated knowledge, bunk, fantasy, fallacy. So we should be those who are in the forefront of commanding what is established best practice, and we should be advocating against what is devoid of any justification. So basically any sort of fallacious behavior. And then when we come to a problem like this COVID thing or pandemics or whatever, we will be in a position to give guidance and not to stand in queue by those who are serving the satanic order to give us guidance. And unfortunately, that is where we are right now. My friends, COVID is one thing. There are many other challenges, and we will only meet it. We will only be able to develop that ummah, kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. We will only become that best nation, that vanguard nation, if we transform our idea of what is knowledge and our idea of what is being a good person. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.